In the early 1930s, American film company RKO Pictures, hit hard by the Great Depression, was struggling financially. At the same time, filmmaker and adventurer Marion C. Cooper, inspired by his fascination with gorillas, was shopping around his idea for a film featuring a massive ape fighting a Komodo dragon. Eventually, he, along with friend and collaborator Ernest B. Schoedsack, found themselves employed at RKO, and while working on an adaptation of The Most Dangerous Game, came across test footage of a film about dinosaurs called Creation, a passion project headed by stop-motion animator Willis O'Brien. Recognizing the technique as the best possible means to bring his gorilla epic to life, Cooper convinced the studio to greenlight his film. During production, it would be known by many names: The Beast, The Eighth Wonder, but eventually it would simply be known as King Kong, a film that changed the art of cinema forever.
Kong, the eighth wonder of the world.
It is 1932, and filmmaker Carl Denham has yet to find his leading lady for a mysterious new film he intends to make halfway across the world. The night before they depart, he comes across Ann Darrow, a down-on-her-luck New Yorker who jumps at the opportunity for adventure. Just before they arrive, Denham reveals they are heading to Skull Island, an uncharted island purported to be the home of a legendary beast named Kong. There they witness the natives preparing a mysterious ritual sacrifice, who, upon seeing Ann, kidnap her and offer her to their god, Kong, a gigantic ape who immediately becomes infatuated with her. It's now up to Carl Denham, first mate Jack Driscoll, and the rest of the crew to venture into the heart of the island and face off against an amalgam of prehistoric monstrosities to save Anne from the clutches of the beast. It cannot be overstated how much the art of cinema owes to the original King Kong. It was the first of its kind, the first full-blown blockbuster that showed audiences at the time things they've never seen before. In doing so, it captured the imagination of the world for the decades that followed, inspiring countless filmmakers and influencing popular culture in incredibly profound ways. It has been remade, reimagined, and parodied numerous times, to the point where even those who haven't seen the film are aware of its iconography. Perhaps most importantly, it was the progenitor of the giant monster genre, and therefore a treasure of utmost value. Simply put, had there been no Kong, the world of cinema would be a very different place. You'd think after all this time that King Kong would have lost its bite, but that is not the case. It is a quintessential adventure film, briskly timed and structured in such a way so as to maximize the impact of every moment. The film takes its time, holding off on revealing Kong just long enough, and once it does, and the characters cross the literal wall that divides reality from fantasy, the film transforms into a non-stop prehistoric fever dream that races from one nightmare sequence to the next. The centerpiece is the now iconic fight between Kong and the T-Rex, which, while obviously crude by modern standards, is still impressive and remains one of the finest examples of the art of stop-motion animation. King Kong has a rather large cast of supporting characters, but the narrative is divided amongst its trio of leading players, at the forefront of which is Carl Denham, played by Robert Armstrong. A not-so-subtle stand-in for director Marion C. Cooper himself, Denham is a cocky, tenacious thrill-seeker, and Armstrong manages to make him likable even as his stubborn showmanship causes nothing but pain and suffering. Bruce Cabot plays the gruff and tough sailor Jack Driscoll, and while his initial temperament, particularly towards Anne, is immediately off-putting, he becomes a more likable leading man as the film goes along. The real star, though, is Fay Wray, who radiates in every scene she's in, and while her role is almost insultingly simple, especially by today's standards, she fits into the damsel in distress role so organically that it's no wonder she became an icon of cinema.
Rise and scream, man! Scream for your life!
Being one of the first special effects-driven films, what everyone remembers most about King Kong, though, are the special effects, which were revolutionary at the time. Many new technologies and techniques were invented to bring Skull Island and its creatures to life, and the results are stunning, with some sequences incorporating multiple techniques all working separately at the same time. The score by Max Steiner is also a first of its kind, and is thus a revelation, darkly atmospheric as it is explosively frantic. The major showstopper, however, is, of course, course, Kong himself. And Willis O'Brien's animation does a great job making him feel like a real living creature with personality. Despite being the film's antagonistic force, he is clearly portrayed as a tragic figure, and this mixture, along with so many other elements, is what has made him such an endurable monster and beloved character. If there are any faults to be had with King Kong, it is the dated racial and sexist stereotypes that permeate throughout the film. It's impossible to watch this movie in modern times and not be jarred by certain elements that would be deemed deeply problematic by today's standards. With that being said, however, you can't necessarily hold that against a movie made almost a century ago. Like any movie, King Kong is a product of its time, as much a historical artifact as it is a work of art. Thus, keeping this in mind is integral to maximizing one's enjoyment of the film. What shouldn't be controversial, though, is how important the original King Kong is, not just within the film industry, but within the broader culture of modern Western society. The movie was a game changer in every way. It helped establish the language of cinema and push the craft of filmmaking to a new level. So much of what we take for granted about movies and how they are made and presented, we owe to King Kong. It is the prototypical monster movie that inspired multiple generations of storytellers and countless imitators, and in the process spawned an entire genre. As both a cultural relic and a piece of art, it is a must-see for cinephiles and kaiju fans alike. For more reviews and opinions on all things King Kong, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths. What could I possibly say about Gojira that hasn't been said a million times already? The film is the granddaddy of all kaiju movies. It created a genre and influenced the course of Japanese cinema in ways that are still felt today. It was one of those lightning in a bottle type movies where various creative forces come together to create a work of art that changes everything. Gojira is about the end of the world. If the end of the world came in the form of a giant radioactive dinosaur. It of course sounds silly on paper, but like all good ideas, it's the execution that matters. And here, it is executed almost flawlessly. And the result is a timeless classic that spoke to an entire generation, allowing them to consider and cope with a national tragedy that still stung and lingered in their minds. Now, none of this would have been possible without the talents of the cast and crew both on and off the screen. Drawing from his own experiences during the war, director Ishiro Honda brings an earthy, documentarian style to the film, making it feel believable and thus all the more haunting, especially in no small part to special effects maestro Ijai Tsuburaya, whom, working within his limitations, managed to craft sequences of destruction that, while dated, are still impressive to this day. The human characters aren't the most complex, but their simplicity gives the story an elegance that grounds the extraordinary events within the mundane. Akira Takarada, Momomo Kochi, Akihiko Hirata, and Takahashi Shimura all bring their characters to life in subdued and relatable ways that make it easy to sympathize with them. But the star of the show is Godzilla, of course, here at his most abjectly evil, a fire-breathing dragon of mass destruction who rises from the ocean depths with apocalyptic intentions. This film introduced everything that would go on to define the monster. His iconic look, a mutant crossbreed between a T-Rex and a Stegosaurus. His atomic breath, able to set ablaze anything it touches. His invulnerability, the unlimited potential of atomic power made flesh. And of course, who could forget his trademark earth-shattering roar, created by the always incredible Akira Ifukube, whose musical compositions elevate the film to the stratosphere, giving Godzilla an instantly memorable theme that you'll catch yourself humming every once in a while. With so many films in this franchise, most of them colorful, fun, and schlocky, it can be shocking for the uninitiated to discover just how dour and melancholic the original film is. Not content with being another by-the-numbers monster flick, Gojira is a mood piece that uses the blockbuster format to explore then modern-day concerns over mankind's pursuit for the next big superweapon and the dangers of atomic power. As his name suggests, Godzilla is a living deity, a being who seeks to punish us for the sins of his creation. Man, woman, or child, it doesn't matter. All are guilty. And so the film doesn't end with the beast dead, the city saved, and the hero victorious. While Godzilla does die, his death casts a dark shadow over the future of humanity. What hope do we have when good men unwittingly create superweapons? How can we survive when we have the power to create monsters? Gojira isn't your average Godzilla movie. It isn't even your average monster movie. It is something more. A legitimate work of art with a message and a heart that happens to feature one of cinema's greatest fictional characters. In over 60 years, it still doesn't get much better than this. For more reviews and opinions on all things Godzilla, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths. With Gamera, Guardian of the Universe becoming a critical and financial darling for Daiei, both in and outside of Japan, the studio quickly greenlit a sequel, once again to be directed by Shusuke Kaneko, who, having proven himself, was afforded more creative control. At first, serious consideration was given to reimagining more of Gamera's classic foes, but eventually it was decided to go in a completely original direction and create an all-new monster for him to fight. And so, only a year after Guardian of the Universe saved the flying turtle from cinematic extinction, its sequel, Gamera 2 Attack of Legion, was released, which took the already impressive formula of its predecessor to the next level. A large meteor crashes near Hokkaido, causing strange phenomena to occur near the surrounding area. Soon after, an enormous plant sprouts in the heart of Sapporo, bringing with it swarms of man-sized insect-like creatures which begin attacking people. Luckily, Gamera arrives to destroy the pod, but is overwhelmed by swarms of the creatures, now appropriately dubbed Legion. To make matters worse, a monstrous Mother Legion emerges, which proves to be an overwhelmingly powerful foe for the flying turtle. With Gamera apparently outmatched, the Japanese military give it their all to aid him in stopping the alien nightmare from overwhelming the planet and spreading its seed to even farther reaches of the universe. Following the gargantuan footsteps of Guardian of the Universe, Gamera Attack of Legion is a significant improvement in nearly every way. Bigger monsters, bigger battles, and bigger stakes make for a darker, edgier film that isn't afraid to put Gamera through the ringer. This is a splendidly crafted kaiju flick that dances delicately on a high-wire act of tension from beginning to end. And while characterization and nuance aren't quite this film's forte, it more than makes up for it with amazingly executed creature effects and explosive, highly detailed set pieces that still impress to this day. Attack of Legion is an intense experience all the way through. With its universe having already been established in the prior film, things get going very quickly. As with most kaiju flicks, the story here is remarkably simple, but is told with a steady yet nimble hand. It's always moving forward, ratcheting up the tension all throughout the runtime, which is peppered with one standout moment after another, before culminating in some of the best monster action ever committed to screen. Both Gamera and Legion are fantastic achievements in suitmation that really make you appreciate the art form. Aside from some subtle design upgrades, Gamera remains mostly the same and is brought to life with even greater levels of detail and realism that really go a long way towards making you feel for him as he continuously gets thrashed by Legion, which is an even more impressive creation. Looking like an angel ripped straight from Evangelion, it is an impressively designed and executed creature, a strange, truly otherworldly inhuman beast that dwarfs Gamera, and thus is incredibly intimidating. Every battle between them, from the swarms of little legions to the all-encompassing mother itself, is bloody and brutal, making Gamera feel extra vulnerable, more so than perhaps ever before. It's a good thing then that he's got a couple extra tricks of his own up his shell. One area in which Attack of Legion isn't quite as strong is the characters. While by no means bad, the human cast isn't as memorable as the previous film and are given very little development outside of the plot. Still, returning screenwriter Kazunori Ito embellishes them with little quirks that make them stand out, and the performances by all the actors are really solid. Miki Mizuno immediately elicits sympathy as Midori Honami, a science center curator whose knowledge and perception of Legion proves quite handy to Colonel Yusuke Watarase, played by Toshiyuki Nagashima, a military man who works with Midori to better understand and fight back against the seemingly unstoppable monster. The one major returning character from Guardian of the Universe is Asagi, once again played by Ayako Fujitani, and though her role is much less substantial here, her presence brings some much appreciated continuity to what is largely a standalone film. Building off their experience on Guardian of the Universe, both director Shusuke Kaneko and special effects director Shinji Higuchi show major improvements in their storytelling capabilities. This is a more confident, assured film, with scenes ebbing and flowing together in an organic way that builds to some truly spectacular moments that are brought to life with beautifully handcrafted special effects. Adding to their effectiveness is the immaculate sound design, which adds weight and heft to the creatures that make them feel even more alive. Ko Otani returns to score, and brings with him epic new compositions, along with, of course, the same themes established in the previous film. All in all, this is one excellent looking and sounding film. Gamera 2 Attack of Legion is that rare sequel that manages to top its predecessor, a bigger film with bigger stakes and a bigger monster that really makes Gamera fight for his life. This is an intense, bloody, brutal monster movie that shows off what can be accomplished when you have the right people working their magic behind the camera. It has some of the best practical monster effects you'll ever see that over 20 years later still have the ability to leave you awed wondering how they did it. Characterization is admittedly light, but when the monster stuff is this good, you'll likely be too captivated to care. Thrilling and explosively entertaining, it's hard to imagine Gamera can get much better than this. For more reviews and opinions on all things Gamera, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths. With Shusuke Kaneko having now directed two critically acclaimed and financially successful Gamera films for Daiei, the studio was happy to have him direct yet another. Working alongside him once again were special effects director Shinji Higuchi, screenwriter Kazunori Ito, and composer Ko Otani, who together would take their time and put together a Gamera film unlike any other, pushing themselves beyond what they had accomplished in the already impressive predecessors. The resulting film was Gamera 3 Revenge of Iris, which concludes the Heisei Gamera trilogy by being one of the greatest kaiju films ever made. 3 years after Gamera saved the Earth from Legion, Gauss have begun appearing across the globe, setting Gamera on a warpath that costs the lives of thousands. Meanwhile, Ayana, a young girl who blames Gamera for the death of her parents, comes across a strange creature hiding out in a temple in the village of Asuka. Ayana names it Iris, and the two bond over their shared hatred for Gamera. Soon, however, it attempts to merge with her, and fueled by her thirst for revenge, begins growing and consuming the life force of people. Sensing this new threat to the planet, Gamera intervenes, who, along with ornithologist Dr. Mayumi Nagamine and Asagi Kusanagi, fights to save both Ayana's soul and the fate of all mankind. With both preceding Gamera films having set a new benchmark for modern kaiju cinema at the time, you'd think it would be near impossible to top their achievements. And yet, Gamera 3 Revenge of Iris does just that, taking the franchise into even darker territory by telling a tale that is as epic in scale as it is intimate in its intentions. Like all good trilogy cappers, it brings the story full circle while also expanding the mythology in such a way that brings Kaneko's amazing trilogy to a bitter, somber, and explosive end. This is a film where all the creative forces at play were firing on all cylinders, creating a modern kaiju masterpiece that still holds up remarkably well 20 years later. Right from the start, Revenge of Iris demonstrates that it is no ordinary kaiju flick, ingeniously reframing the victory witnessed at the end of Guardian of the Universe into a tragedy by giving us a glimpse into the life of someone caught in the crossfire. From there, the film wastes no time, establishing a world beset on all sides by monsters who couldn't care less about the humanity that gets in their way. This is a spiritual story about revenge and enlightenment, featuring compelling characters both old and new, and an intensely melancholic and apocalyptic atmosphere that sticks with you long after the credits roll. The cast here is better than ever, and are a prime example of how human characters can enhance the kaiju plot. Unlike Attack of Legion, many characters from Guardian of the Universe return, and in more substantial roles. It's nice to see Dr. Nagamine and Asako back, once again played by Shinobu Nakayama and Yokojiro Hataro, with the latter having a delightful little 3-film arc that unites the films. Ayako Fujitani once again returns to play Asagi, and unlike the last 2 films, finds herself in the thick of the action. Playing her dark reflection is Ai Maeda as Ayana, a young girl that forms a psychic connection with Iris, and uses that connection to seek vengeance on Gamera. Ayana is a very compelling protagonist, whose revenge arc adds human pathos to the monster action, making the battles between the colossal creatures more emotional than your average brawl. And speaking of battles, Revenge of Iris has some of the most jaw-dropping action scenes you'll ever see in the giant monster genre. The Shibuya District attack alone is one of the most impressive kaiju scenes ever filmed, showing the utter devastation and loss of life that comes when monsters fight in heavily populated cities. It's easily the highlight of the film, disturbing while also offering a huge adrenaline rush that genre enthusiasts will absolutely adore. Gamera sports a brand new, meaner, sleeker design, reflecting how the character has completely shed his friend of all children moniker. He's genuinely frightening looking, forcing you to look at the monster in a whole new light. Iris, on the other hand, is quite the opposite, lacking almost any sort of personality or menace. It's a different kind of antagonist, one that hides its wicked intentions behind a blank, expressionless, almost peaceful persona. The two only battle once, and while it's pretty short, it's absolutely brutal, and even claustrophobic, as the fight has the unique distinction of taking place inside a single building as opposed to a big wide cityscape. Revenge of Iris also takes the filmmaking craft perfected in the last film to even greater heights. Shusuke Kaneko's direction is more confident than ever, and Shinji Higuchi tops himself again, blending computer graphics and practical effects to create sequences of visual splendor that, while not always seamless, are no less impressive. And once again we get more beautiful music by Ko Otani, this time drawing the bombast back to create a more subdued soundscape. Gamera 3 Revenge of Iris is that rare trilogy capper that manages to top its two predecessors, and in this case that's saying a lot. Technically it is amazing, an example of how suitmation can still have a place in the digital age. And even better is that it doesn't show off for its own sake. This film is not empty spectacle, it goes for quality over quantity, using its kaiju sparingly to tell a very human story about grief and redemption. It is the gold standard of the genre, as idea-driven as it is wildly entertaining, and has the confidence to conclude the Heisei trilogy in an ambiguous way that sets fire to your imagination, leaving you wishing to see what happens next. 20 years later, you'll be hard-pressed to find a better kaiju film than this. For more reviews and opinions on all things Gamera, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths. While deep in the middle of pre-production for his adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, Mexican filmmaker Guillermo del Toro crossed paths with his old collaborator and writer Travis Beacham, who at the time was working on an original story about giant robots fighting giant monsters for Legendary Pictures. Intrigued, del Toro agreed to produce and co-write, with the added stipulation that he would be happy to direct should At the Mountains of Madness fall through. As fate would have it, this would be the case. In the following week, del Toro signed on to direct direct the now titled Pacific Rim, a one-of-a-kind mecha and monster-infused spectacle from one of this generation's greatest filmmakers. Following the emergence of massive alien creatures called Kaiju from a portal under the Pacific Ocean, mankind fights back with equally massive robots called Jaegers. While successful at first, the Kaiju proved too powerful, and now have humanity at the brink of extinction, forcing head of the Jaeger program Stacker Pentecost to assemble what few Jaegers are left for one last-ditch effort to seal the portal. Included in the mission is Raleigh Beckett, an ex-Jaeger pilot who left after the death of his brother, and Mako Mori, Pentecost's protege and adopted daughter with a tragic past who dreams of being a pilot. Together, these two must learn to trust each other and confront their pasts if they are to step into the metallic shoes of Gypsy Danger and save the world.
Come on! Let's do this together!
On paper, Pacific Rim shouldn't be as good as it is. An amalgamation of various ideas and concepts commonly found within the genre, from a narrative perspective it is all very familiar, and thus easily could have fallen into trite mediocrity. And in lesser hands this would indeed have been the case. But under the award-winning eye of Guillermo del Toro, the film is a neon-fused feast for the eyes and the heart, offering colorful, eye-catching visuals, immaculate world-building, and a jaw-dropping sense of scale that few films could ever hope to match. From its opening seconds, Pacific Rim draws you in with a prologue that's as gripping as it is efficient, effortlessly constructing a world that feels believable and lived in, while at the same time never turning away from its inherent fantasy. In fact, the film embraces the cheesy, excessive nature of the genre, relishing in the cartoony logic and broad characterizations that have always made these kinds of films so appealing. This is, of course, no surprise, as this is what Del Toro has always excelled at. No matter what kind of film, the man is a master of his craft, and with Pacific Rim, he has created a wonderfully entertaining and wildly creative homage to the kinds of films that have captured the imagination of adults and kids around the world. The cast here is great all around, appropriately over the top and melodramatic, but also committed and earnest. Charlie Hunnam is solid as Raleigh, portraying an everyman wounded and without purpose who finds his calling when he meets Mako, played by Rinko Kikuchi, who is fantastic. She gives the character both a strength and vulnerability that makes her the film's most compelling character. Idris Elba is great as always as Stacker Pentecost, deftly able to convey the immense mental and emotional strain of a man carrying the fate of the world in his hands. Del Toro regular Ron Perlman makes a special appearance as Hannibal Chow, a black market dealer specializing in kaiju organs. He is easily the most eccentric character, aside from maybe Newt Geisler, played by Charlie Day, who just may be the standout character simply by virtue of being the audience stand-in for the kaiju fan in us all.
Or awful, you know, whatever you want to call it.
Excuse him, he's a kaiju groupie, he loves
Shut up, Herman, I don't love them, okay?
From a technical perspective, Pacific Rim is unrivaled, a seamless blend of practical effects and computer animation that brings the world to life flawlessly. Both the Jaegers and the Kaiju are well-designed wonders to behold, and the fights between them are pure epic spectacle, which, under a lesser director, would be all sound and fury, but Del Toro turns them into beautiful ballets of destruction that go out of their way to sell you on the sheer force of power and weight that is being thrown around. All of this is enhanced by the excellent score by Ramin Djawadi, whose fist-pumping theme for Gypsy Danger is guaranteed to get stuck in your head, and that's a good thing. All of this would be for nothing if the film was nothing more than hollow action, but Pacific Rim wears its heart on its sleeve, unafraid to have its characters emote in big, broad strokes in ways that border on the edge of being cheesy. This is very much intentional, both in regards to the genre with which it operates and the greater themes of unity and human connection the film espouses. It is only through international cooperation and the literal melding of the minds of its heroes that mankind can save itself. These are by no means new ideas, but again, under the humanistic touch of Guillermo del Toro, it works, and the result is a monster movie that is smarter than it is often given credit for.
By Jove, we are going to own this thing for sure!
Pacific Rim succeeds at everything it aspires to be. A film for anyone and everyone willing to meet it on its own terms, it is pure, unadulterated cinematic joy on the highest level. Simple, concise, and most importantly, a ton of fun. The characters are elemental but relatable, the action unmatched in its scale, and the world building is second to none, filled with a sense of childlike wonder and teeming with an attention to detail that only a director like Guillermo del Toro can bring to the table. It is as much a wildly successful original blockbuster as it is a pitch-perfect love letter to anime and the kaiju genre, one that's destined to become a classic. For more views and opinions on all things Pacific Rim, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths.
Suddenly, you can fight the hurricane. You can win.
Sometime in 2015, Academy Award-winning actress Anne Hathaway found herself in a bit of a creative rut. While searching for a project that would challenge her, she came across a script by Spanish filmmaker Nacho Vigalondo about an out-of-control alcoholic woman who suddenly finds herself in control of a giant monster. Drawn to the unusual nature of the story, Hathaway was the first to sign on, using her considerable star power to get the film greenlit and fast-tracked into production. Ambiguously titled Colossal, the film failed to find an audience when it was released in April of 2017, proving to be just too odd, too strange, and too clever for average moviegoers.
The unprecedented nature of this phenomenon
that tingle?
has shocked the scientific community around
You know
the
you're
world.
watching something that's going to change
Stephen
the course
Hawking
of
has been
history.
the most outspoken among scientists.
When out-of-work writer Gloria is thrown out of her boyfriend's apartment, she heads back to her hometown in New England, where she reunites with Oscar, a childhood friend who offers her a part-time job working as a waitress at his bar. At the same time, a giant monster suddenly appears over Seoul, causing mass pandemonium and destruction, and capturing the attention of the world. Gradually, Gloria realizes that not only does the monster only appear when she walks through the local playground at exactly 8:05 in the morning, but that she can control it, the implications of which horrifies her. As she swears never to step foot in the playground again, Oscar discovers that he has the same power, able to manifest a robot when he steps into the playground at the same time. Fueled by self-hate and constant drinking, Oscar begins to grow mad with power, forcing Gloria to step up and save the citizens of Seoul, even at her own expense. Colossal is a movie so bizarre in concept and so diverse in tone that if placed in the wrong hands, it would have failed spectacularly. Luckily, however, this is not the case. Through confident direction and a clever script by Nacho Vigalondo, the film is a monster movie with indie sensibilities, examining very real and intimate issues regarding toxic relationships and substance abuse by contextualizing them through the familiar trappings of the kaiju genre. City destruction, people running for their lives, monster brawls, it's all here. But like the best monster movies, it's not spectacle for spectacle's sake. This is a film where the monster as metaphor is out in full force, and while some may sneer at it as being pretentious, those open to the weirdness will find a one-of-a-kind film that's brilliance will sneak up on you.
Hi, I'm the robot, she's the monster.
Part of what makes Colossal work so well is the unpredictability of the story. The film goes in directions you don't expect, and where it ends up isn't always pretty. It is unafraid to visit the dark places of the human psyche, and there are some scenes of nail-biting tension that are genuinely hard to watch. But at no point does it ever devolve into outright bleakness. In fact, the film is actually pretty funny in places, encouraging you to laugh at the very same darkness it forces you to face. And it does this exceptionally well, able to balance tone in a masterful way that never draws attention to itself.
Just like I thought. It's a good monster. He's been a good guy the whole time.
But by far the best thing about Colossal is its two leads. Anne Hathaway gives a wonderfully sympathetic performance as Gloria, a woman who just can't seem to control her worst impulses. And while this is obviously frustrating to the viewer, by the end you'll become heavily invested in her character, and are rooting for her to succeed. Conversely, there's Jason Sudeikis as Oscar, a man that at first seems friendly and kind, but gradually becomes more sinister as the film goes along. He is legitimately terrifying in some scenes, but not entirely without sympathy, making him even more frightening. Together, these two carry the film, bringing to life fully realized fictional characters that cover a wide spectrum of human emotions, framed on a grand scale without ever being preachy or pretentious.
Not a direct hit, but you got the majority of them down there.
As far as the actual kaiju element, while it is limited, it is inherent to the core concept of the film, and every moment is effectively utilized to bring the themes to life. Gloria's monster is as strange looking as everything else, looking like a gangly gremlin or some mutated bipedal toad. And then on the other hand, you have Oscar's robot, which has a very classical, almost Transformer-like feel to it. Given the film's small budget, the majority of the action is presented through television sets and phones, grounding it within the perspective of the characters while also adding a bit of commentary on the role technology and social media play in modern society. It's the most shallow aspect of the film for sure, but its presence is appreciated nonetheless.
You know, I mean, look how many hits this thing has. There's not this many people alive in the world. Look.
Okay, you're right. Never mind.
Colossal really is a movie unlike any other. A quirky, dark, and immensely clever indie drama that uses kaiju to tell a compelling story of a woman overcoming her own personal monsters. By all means, it shouldn't work, but thanks to great writing and direction by Nacho Vigalondo, and two incredible performances from Anne Hathaway and Jason Sudeikis, it excels into being one of the greatest genre mashups of modern times that sadly isn't shown the admiration it deserves. This is the definition of a criminally underrated film, an odd gem of a movie that really ought to be seen by more people. Thus, Colossal comes highly recommended for fans of giant monster movies and for people who like their films a bit more experimental and take risks. There's no other movie quite like it. For more reviews and opinions on all things kaiju, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths. With the 2014 American Godzilla film proving to be both a critical and financial adrenaline shot for the franchise, Toho figured it was a good time to bring the monster home, and announced their plans to make a Godzilla film unlike any other. To do this, they sought out Hideaki Anno, a visionary creative force within the world of Japanese animation. A massive fan of Godzilla, Anno was given the freedom to write and direct alongside his friend and longtime collaborator Shinji Higuchi, and together the two hoped to create a film with as much social and political relevance as the original while making it their own. Simply titled Shin Godzilla, it would end up being one of the most striking and profound entries in the series. The discovery of a mysteriously deserted yacht coincides with the sightings of a massive creature in Tokyo Bay. As the horrifying monster begins making its way on land, leaving devastation in its wake, the Japanese government desperately scrambles to figure out a way to stop it. Constantly evolving to every strategy they employ, the fully formed creature, dubbed Godzilla, proves invincible, threatening the existence of all life on the planet. With little hope left, the world considers the use of atomic weapons on Japan, forcing the scrappy nation to come together and figure out an alternative solution before their worst nightmares are realized. Like the original in 1984's The Return of Godzilla, Shin Godzilla is a film that speaks to the fears and tensions of its time, in this case unexpected natural disasters that leave governments at a standstill, using Godzilla as a stand-in for those fears in a way that adds a new spin to the character. And in this case, as filtered through the unique vision of Hideaki Anno, it becomes a whole different beast, a film that is so unabashedly different from anything that came before it, while at the same time honoring the spirit of not just the original, but of the franchise as a whole. Shin Godzilla lacks the sort of cheese that even the best of the franchise often couldn't avoid. Utterly earnest and sincere, the film treats an admittedly absurd scenario with a sense of realism rivaled only by the original, and is told with a hectic, breakneck pace that perfectly replicates the nature of the drama that unfolds. It throws you into the deep end without a life jacket, expecting you to keep up with a huge cast of characters and an ever-escalating sequence of scenarios that recalls the horrific imagery that came out of the 2011 Tohoku earthquake. The film doesn't pull any punches, showcasing images of apocalyptic devastation few films have ever matched. It is an intense, cathartic cinematic experience that only its nation of origin can ever truly understand. What elevates Shin Godzilla even more is that it balances this intensity with a biting satire that gives the film a sharp sense of wit. Armed with a pointed script, Anno mocks and parodies the Japanese government to great effect without ever devolving into outright caricature. The film's sprawling cast doesn't allow much depth, but every character, no matter how minor, has their quirk and is treated with a humanistic touch that allows you to empathize with them even as they make questionable decisions. Serving as the audience surrogate is Rando Yaguchi, played by Hiroki Hase, Hasegawa, a young, ambitious politician whose growing frustration with the old guard is rewarded with more responsibility as the situation with Godzilla grows more dire. Playing opposite him is Satomi Ishihara as Kyoko Ann Patterson, a lively and equally ambitious Japanese-American politician working as a liaison between the two nations. Together, these two work as the film's beating heart, and are surrounded by a quirky cast of characters too massive to account for completely here, though Ran Osugi must be singled out for his performance as Sijai Okochi, the well-meaning but clearly way in over his head Prime Minister of Japan, as does Yutaka Takenouchi as Hideki Akasaka, who brings a sense of dignity and poise to the role. The most controversial aspect of the film may well be Godzilla himself. Even more so than the reviled '98 American film, Shin Godzilla alters both the origins and the look of the monster to such an extent that it will put off purists. But within the context of the film, it works, becoming one of the most disturbing movie monsters ever committed to film. Its cold dead stare combined with its grotesquely misshapen form makes for the most terrifying Godzilla yet, a creature with no conscience or remorse. He is even given some new abilities, and the moment where he first unleashes the full extent of those abilities is a moment as beautiful as it is horrifying, a visually stunning masterclass of destruction unrivaled even by big-budget Hollywood films. Technically, Shin Godzilla is a massive step forward for the franchise. It is the first Toho-produced Godzilla film not to use suitmation, instead using motion capture and CGI to bring him to life. And the results are surprisingly consistent, even flawless at times. The special effects in general are a significant improvement, combining traditional model work and computer graphics into one seamless whole that very rarely ever breaks immersion. Sound design makes intentional use of the old-school sound effects of the Showa-era films, and the music is a combination of classic Ifukube tracks and an original score by Shiro Sagisu, which is haunting and operatic and absolutely fantastic. Shin Godzilla is that rare Godzilla movie that is so much more than just a monster movie. More than anything, at its core, it is about Japan, its place in the modern world, and its hopes and aspirations when faced against insurmountable odds. Under the expert direction of Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, the film soars to heights reached only by the original, becoming the only entry to truly match its greatness. It is methodical, thoughtful, relentless, and most importantly, immensely entertaining and rewatchable, offering its viewers new things to appreciate about it upon every viewing. It's an astonishing work that reminds you just how versatile Godzilla as a concept and character really is, and how the monster matters as much today as it did back in 1954. For more reviews and opinions on all things Godzilla, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths. With the immense critical and financial success of Shin Godzilla in 2016, naturally Toho Studios was itching to make more Godzilla films. However, in accordance with their deal with Legendary Pictures, the producers of the big-budget Hollywood MonsterVerse films, they could not do so until 2020. Using this time to brainstorm where to take the franchise next, Toho ended up approaching director and visual effects expert Takashi Yamazaki, who was himself no stranger to Godzilla, to officially put his personal stamp on the monster. Seeing it as a culmination of his career, Yamazaki conceived of a period piece, spending years honing a script that would take the series back to the time period that birthed it. And so just in time for Godzilla's 70th birthday, and with much anticipation, 2023 saw the release of Godzilla Minus One in both Japan and the United States, a film that proves that even 7 decades later, the franchise still has the power to move an audience and leave them in awe. Just as Japan sees defeat at the end of World War II, kamikaze pilot Koichi Shikishima flees from his duty and lands at a Japanese base established on Odo Island. That same night, a monster attacks, suddenly and violently, leaving Koichi and one other as the sole survivors. Racked with guilt and shame, Koichi returns home to find his family and community decimated, but finds hope in the chance meeting with Noriko, a survivor looking after Akiko, an orphan baby she had rescued. The three move in together, and over the years establish a life together, with Koichi making a living as part of a ragtag crew of minesweepers tasked with with cleaning the shores of Japan of leftover naval mines. But just as Koichi begins to believe he can move on from his guilt, Godzilla returns, enlarged and empowered by the atom bomb. With its sights set on Tokyo and a disempowered government unwilling to fight back, it's up to the everyday citizens and war veterans of Japan to come up with a plan to save their country from total annihilation. Godzilla Minus One is that ultra-rare Godzilla film that aspires and succeeds at being more than just another monster movie. While there are plenty of moments of spectacle, it all exists to support a genuinely compelling melodrama about an everyday man who cannot move on from the horrors of war that left him and his country in shambles. This is not a story about Godzilla. It is a story that features Godzilla as a means of exploring themes of survivor's guilt and the value of human life in a place and time that placed little value in it. It does what the best Godzilla films do, using him as a metaphor for something greater and more universal. The film's greatest asset in this accomplishment is its cast of characters, which is small and full of charm and personality. Ryunosuke Kamiki as the tortured kamikaze pilot Koichi Shikishima brings the darkness to the film, while Minami Hamabe as Noriko brings the light. Together they are the heart of the film, making for an effective will-they-won't-they couple that you can relate to and root for. On the other hand, much of the fun of the film comes with the crew of the Minesweeper Shinsei Maru. Its three members, Yoji, Kenji, and Shiro, played by Kuranosuke Sasaki, Hidetaka Yoshioka, and Yuki Yamada respectively, all represent different perspectives of the film's themes and bring a sense of friendship and camaraderie to the story that culminates in a conclusion that will leave you fist pumping with a tear in your eye. Make no mistake though, Minus One is still a Godzilla film, and an excellent one at that. This is an exceptional blockbuster, one made on a minuscule budget that manages to near perfectly balance the story with the scenes of destruction you come to a Godzilla film to see. Godzilla himself is at his most animalistic and brutal here, targeting people with malicious intent. The first big action scene, where Godzilla chases the Shinsei Maru, is one of the greatest of the franchise, not just because of the mounting tension it creates, but because it presents the monster first and foremost as a creature of the sea, showing him up close and doing things we've never seen him do before. He enters scenes with a sudden, in-your-face savagery that makes him feel more dangerous than ever before. This threatening new Godzilla is of course made possible by the incredible special effects that bring the franchise to new award-winning heights. Godzilla has never looked better, never moved better, and never destroyed better. But it goes beyond just the title creature. The entire production is impressive, blending practical sets and digital effects together in a way that, while not always perfect, are at their worst always good enough that you are never taken out of the film. Sound design is also impeccable. The film knows how to use both noise and silence at appropriate moments to instill emotion in the audience. The original score by Naoki Sato is also very good, unrelenting when appropriate and swelling when needed. The film also employs some classic Ifukube tracks from Mothra vs. Godzilla and King Kong vs. Godzilla, along with, of course, the original Godzilla March. The result is a simple but effective score that blends the old with the new, and perfectly represents the film it's attached to. As far as any flaws go, there are only a few worth mentioning, the biggest of which is the pacing. The film slows down considerably at the middle point, as it builds to the final act. And while everything that happens during this portion of the film is crucial to the story, you may be looking at your watch wondering when Godzilla is going to show up again. If only because the moments when he appeared prior were balanced so well with the drama for the first hour. Also, the film does have some logical inconsistencies, and characters are able to appear and do some things that stretch the limits of believability. Overall though, Godzilla Minus One is a new benchmark for the Godzilla franchise, which, considering its age, makes its achievements all the more impressive. The film manages to be both a moving character piece, featuring a thematically compelling story performed by great actors, and a giant monster blockbuster with scenes of heart-pounding destruction that rivals its most expensive competition, and in doing so becomes not just one of the greatest Godzilla films ever made, but a remarkable film all its own, one that both fans and general audiences can both enjoy together. For more reviews and opinions on all things Godzilla, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths.